I was deadheading the rose bushes along the back fence when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. My hands were dirty, my reading glasses were inside, and I'd been looking forward to a quiet Saturday morning with nothing but the smell of soil and the sound of cardinals. But something made me pull off my gardening glove and dig the phone out of my apron pocket. It was my son-in-law, Marcus. That alone was strange. Marcus never called me. We weren't unfriendly, we were polite the way people are when they're trying. But he was not a man who picked up the phone for small talk. In 4 years of marriage to my daughter, he had called me exactly twice. Once to tell me she'd been in a minor car accident and was fine. Once to ask what she wanted for Christmas because she wouldn't tell him. "Hello, Marcus." There was noise in the background. Voices. Something that sounded like a sliding door. "She's asking for you," he said. His voice was flat in a way that told me he was working very hard to keep it that way. "You should come." I set down my pruning shears. "What happened?" He paused too long. "There was a fall," he said. "At the house. She's at Mercy General." I was already walking toward the back door. "My daughter's name is Iris. She was 34 years old that morning, 7 months pregnant with her first child, and the house she'd fallen at was not her own. It was her mother-in-law's, a woman named Constance, who had never in 4 years once called me by my first name. I drove 40 minutes to the hospital with my gardening clothes still on. I didn't stop to change. I kept telling myself it was a fall. People fall. It would be bruises and worry, and then everything would be fine. I told myself that the whole way there. I think I needed to believe it right up until I walked into the room and saw my daughter's face. She was lying with the side rail up, a monitor clicked to her finger, an IV in her arm. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut. There was bruising along her cheekbone that had already gone purple and yellow at the edges, which meant it hadn't just happened, it had happened before this morning. Marcus was standing by the window with his back to us both. I sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. It was cold. "Baby," I said. She turned her face toward me. The good eye filled up. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want you to see." I didn't say anything. I smoothed her hair back from her forehead the way I'd done when she was small and had nightmares. "What happened?" I asked. "The truth." She looked past me at Marcus. He didn't move from the window. "She pushed me," Iris said, very quietly. "We were arguing at the top of the stairs and she pushed me. I made myself breathe. Constance." Iris nodded once. She said. Her voice broke. She pressed her lips together and tried again. "She said I was lucky I hadn't lost it yet. She said a woman like me didn't deserve to carry her grandchild." The room was very still. "A woman like me," Iris repeated. She looked at me then, and I understood exactly what Constance had meant when she said it. "My daughter is black. Her father, my late husband Theodore, was the most decent man I have ever known. Iris has his eyes and his stubbornness and his laugh, and she is the greatest thing I have ever done with my life." Constance had known all of this for 4 years, and apparently she had been smiling through every holiday dinner and every birthday cake while she waited for a moment when she could finally say what she actually thought. I looked at my son-in-law, still standing at the window. "Marcus," I said. My voice came out very even. "Did you know?" He turned then. His face looked like he hadn't slept. Or maybe like he'd been sleeping too well for too long and had just now woken up. "Not about this," he said. "I knew she had," he stopped. Started again. I knew she said things sometimes. I told myself it was generational, that she didn't mean it. She pushed your pregnant wife down a flight of stairs, I said. He nodded. His jaw tightened. I know. I turned back to my daughter. Is the baby okay? They're monitoring her. Iris put her free hand over her stomach. The doctor said she looks stable. They want to keep me overnight. I held her hand until she fell asleep, and then I walked out into the hallway and called my brother. His name is Raymond. He is 68 years old, 2 years older than me, and he spent 30 years as a detective with the Atlanta Police Department before he retired to a small farm outside Macon. He grows tomatoes and keeps bees, and everyone in the county knows his name. He answered on the second ring. Something happened to Iris, I said. He didn't ask questions. He said, I'm on my way. That's the thing about Raymond. Our mother raised us to believe that family was not a feeling. It was a decision you made every morning before your feet hit the floor. Raymond has never once in his life made a different decision. He was at the hospital by early afternoon. I told him everything in the family waiting room, keeping my voice low, my hands folded in my lap. I watched his face while I talked. Raymond has a face that doesn't give much away. 30 years of interviewing people will do that to you, but I've known him since before he could walk, and I saw what moved behind his eyes when I got to the part about the stairs. Where is she now? He asked. He meant Constance. Home, I assume. No one has called the police. Raymond was quiet for a moment. Marcus won't call them, he said. It wasn't a question. He said he doesn't want to make things worse. Worse than what? Raymond said. I didn't answer that, because there was no answer worth giving. I need you to let me handle the next part, he said. Not because you can't, because I know how. I nodded. But Raymond, I said, I need you to understand something first. This isn't just about the fall. Constance has been doing this for 4 years. Little things, comments, the way she talks to Iris at family dinners, the way she looks at her. This has been building. Raymond looked at me. I know, he said. That's exactly why we're not going to rush. The hospital kept Iris for 2 nights. The baby, a girl who would later be named Clara, stayed put and kept her heart rate steady, and seemed to have inherited her grandfather Theodore's stubbornness from across whatever distance separates the living from the dead. I sat with Iris through both nights, sleeping in the recliner beside her bed with a hospital blanket that smelled like industrial detergent. Marcus came and went. He brought food from the diner down the street, which was the right thing to do. He sat with Iris and held her hand, which was also the right thing. But on the second evening, when Iris was sleeping and he and I were both in the hallway with bad coffee, he said something that I have thought about many times since. My mother isn't well, he said. Mentally, I mean, she's been struggling since my father died. I looked at him. I understand that can be true, I said carefully, and I understand grief does things to people. But Marcus, struggling doesn't put your hands on someone. He looked at the floor. No, he said quietly, it doesn't. Has she ever touched Iris before? He was quiet for a long time. Once, he said, she grabbed her arm, hard. Iris told me it left a mark. I talked to my mother and she cried and said she hadn't meant to, and he stopped. You believed her, I said. I wanted to, he said. I wanted to, he said. I didn't tell him what I thought about that. There would be time for that conversation later, and Iris would be the one to have it with him. That was her marriage. What I was responsible for was making sure my daughter and her child were safe, and that the person who had done this did not walk away as though nothing had happened. Raymond spent those 2 days doing what Raymond does. He is not a man who raises his voice or makes threats. He is a man who makes phone calls, reads documents, and asks questions that seem mild until you realize how much he already knew before he asked them. He has a gentleness about him that people mistake for softness until it's too late. By the time Iris was discharged, Raymond had spoken with the attending physician who had documented her injuries. Bruising consistent with a fall downstairs, possible defensive bruising on her forearms, left orbital contusion. He had located 2 neighbors of Constance's who had, on separate occasions, heard shouting from the house during Iris's visits. He had pulled the publicly available records on Constance's address and found a noise complaint filed 18 months earlier. He had also, through a former colleague still on the force, quietly established that the responding officer on Iris's case, it had been filed as an accidental fall, had not taken a full statement from Iris at the hospital, had not noted the bruising on her forearms, had not spoken to anyone else in the house. That report is incomplete, Raymond told me, which means it can be amended. How? Iris files a supplemental statement. I go with her. We document everything, the arm grab Marcus described, the history of comments, all of it. We request the medical records formally. And then we take it to the DA's office. Do you think they'll do anything? Raymond looked at me with those calm detective eyes. I think they will when they understand exactly what they're looking at, he said. Iris went home to her own house, not Marcus's mother's house, her house, the one she'd bought with her own salary before she and Marcus married, which was a decision I have always quietly admired her for. Marcus came with her. He slept on the couch for the first week, not because Iris asked him to, but because he seemed to understand without being told that he needed to earn back the space. I drove over every morning and made breakfast. Raymond came on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We didn't talk about Constance in front of Iris more than necessary. We talked about the baby instead, about the nursery, which was painted a soft green, about names, about the crib that had been Theodore's, that I had kept in my attic for 30 years, waiting for exactly this. But in the evenings, after Iris was resting, Raymond and I sat at her kitchen table and worked. He walked me through every step. What the law said in Georgia about simple battery and aggravated battery, what the elevated charge would be because of Iris's pregnancy. Under Georgia law, an assault on a pregnant woman carries additional weight. What the statute of limitations was. What we needed and what we had. She needs to be willing, Raymond said. Iris does. We can't do this without her. I know. Have you talked to her? Not yet. I'm waiting until she's stronger. Raymond nodded. He stirred his coffee. Marcus is the variable, he said. If he backs her, it goes smoother. If he doesn't, he will, I said. I surprised myself with how certain I sounded. He looked at his wife's face in that hospital room. That was the first time he really looked, I think. But he looked. Raymond was quiet. I hope you're right, he said. I was. 3 weeks after Iris came home from the hospital, she sat across from me at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, and she said, "Tell me what to do." I told her. I told her about the supplemental statement, about the documentation Raymond had gathered, about the DA's office and what Raymond believed they would do with a complete and properly documented case. I told her it would be hard. I told her there would be people who questioned her, who looked for reasons to doubt her, who would bring up the fact that she had no witnesses in the house at the moment it happened. I told her it might take months. Then I told her that her daughter deserved to grow up knowing her mother had stood up. Iris was quiet for a long time. Marcus talked to his mother, she said finally. She told him I'd tripped, that she'd tried to catch me. She paused. She sent me a card, a get-well card, with a Bible verse in it. I kept my face very still. Of course she did, I said. Iris looked down at her mug. Then she looked up. I want to file, she said. I want to do it. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were warm now. Will you come with me, baby? I said. I've been ready for 3 weeks. Raymond drove us to the DA's office on a Tuesday morning in October. Iris wore a grey blazer over her maternity clothes and kept her shoulders back the whole time. I sat beside her. Raymond sat on her other side. The assistant DA was a woman named Sorrells, about 40, with reading glasses she kept taking on and off. She listened to everything. She read the medical report. She looked at the photographs of Iris's injuries which the hospital had taken and which Raymond had obtained properly through the records request. She asked Iris to describe, in her own words, what had happened at the top of those stairs. Iris described it. Clearly, without crying, though I could see what it cost her. Miss Sorrells asked about the prior arm grab, about the comments over 4 years, about the noise complaints from the neighbours. Then she asked Marcus, who had come and sat in the chair against the wall, if he could confirm what his wife had told him about the arm incident. He could. He did. Miss Sorrells took her glasses off and set them on the desk. I can't promise you a specific outcome, she said. What I can tell you is that this documentation is thorough and the case is serious. We will look at charges including aggravated battery, given the circumstances of the pregnancy. We will be in touch. In the parking lot afterward, Iris leaned against Raymond's car and let out a breath that seemed to come from somewhere very deep. Is it always like that? She asked Raymond. Like what? Like you're just sitting there describing the worst thing that ever happened to you and trying to sound like you're reading a weather report. Raymond almost smiled. He has never been a man who smiles easily, but it gets close sometimes. That's exactly what it's like, he said, and you did it perfectly. Constance was charged 8 weeks later. Aggravated battery, the elevated charge, the one that accounted for the pregnancy. Her attorney immediately made statements to anyone who would listen about what a devoted grandmother Constance had been looking forward to becoming, about grief and loss and a terrible misunderstanding on a staircase. The neighbours' statements complicated that story considerably. Marcus's confirmation complicated it further. The fact that Iris had documented, with dates and descriptions she had written in a journal at Raymond's suggestion 3 weeks after leaving the hospital. 14 separate incidents of verbal hostility over 4 years. That did not simplify things for Constance's attorney at all. I won't pretend the process was clean. There were hard days. There was a period where Marcus's extended family stopped speaking to him and he came to dinner at our house, looking like a man walking underwater. There was a night Iris called me at 2 a.m, not because anything specific had happened, but because the weight of it had become too heavy to carry alone at 2 a.m, which is the hour when everything true feels permanent. I drove over. I made tea. We sat in her kitchen until the sky began to lighten. That's what mothers do. Clara was born in December, a week before Christmas. 6 pounds, 9 ounces. She came into the world loudly and looked immediately sceptical of everything around her, which told me she had her grandfather's temperament and would be absolutely fine. I was in the delivery room. Raymond waited outside and paced, which was the first time in my life I had ever seen him pace over anything. When the nurse came out and told him it was a girl and everyone was healthy, he sat down in the waiting room chair and put his face in his hands for a moment. Just a moment. Then he straightened up and was Raymond again. I brought the crib down from my attic the following week. Theodore had made it himself, 40 years ago, out of oak he'd cut from a tree that had come down in a storm on our property. It had held Iris, and it had held Iris's brother before that, and now it held Clara. Marcus painted the nursery again. The green was too dark, Iris decided, and he repainted it without complaint, a softer colour she called First Light. He has been different since that October morning in the DA's office. Not a different person, but a man who finally looked at something clearly and has not been able to unsee it. I think that is the best I could have hoped for. Constance accepted a plea in February, probation, mandatory counselling, a restraining order that requires her to stay a specific distance from Iris and Clara. She will not be in their lives. Marcus has grieved that, and I believe his grief is real. But I have watched him hold his daughter, this small, sceptical girl with Theodore's chin, and I have seen on his face something that looks like a man who has made a decision about what matters. There is a thing I keep coming back to, in the months since all of this. Constance had 4 years. 4 years of holiday dinners and birthday cakes and family photographs where she stood next to my daughter and smiled. 4 years to learn who Iris was, her patience, her humour, the way she laughs too loud at her own jokes, the way she cried at the last 20 minutes of every movie. 4 years. And she looked at all of that and saw only the thing she had decided to see before any of it began. I think about Theodore sometimes when I think about this. He passed 8 years ago, heart attack, quick, which was a mercy. I think about what he would have done if he had been here for any of it. I think he would have gone very quiet in the way he went quiet when something mattered, and then he would have done exactly what needed to be done. Raymond is the closest thing to Theodore that I have left in this world. The morning after Clara came home from the hospital, Raymond drove out from Macon and sat in the kitchen while I made the biscuits from the recipe our mother left us. He held Clara for a long time, this man who paced holes in waiting room floors and has never once in his life talked about his feelings directly. "She looks like Iris did," he said finally. "I know," I said. "And Iris looked like Theodore. She still does." He looked down at the baby. Clara had her fist wrapped around his index finger with a seriousness that suggested she was considering her options. "Then she's going to be all right," Raymond said. I looked at my brother, this man who drove 4 hours without asking why, who sat in DA's offices and gathered records and made phone calls and never once told me I was overreacting or suggested we leave it alone, who taught me 40 years before I needed to know it, that protecting your family is not about being louder or harder than the people who threaten it. It is about being smarter, steadier, and absolutely unwilling to let go. "Yes," I said, "she is." I put the biscuits in the oven and the kitchen filled with the smell of something warm and simple and good, and outside the window the December sky was pale and clear, the kind of morning that asks nothing of you, and my granddaughter held my brother's finger like she had already decided he was someone worth holding on to. I think she was right. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry. Even now, with Clara sleeping in Theodore's crib, and the restraining order filed and everything behind us that can be put behind us, they still ask, and I understand why they ask. What happened to Iris was not an accident, and it was not a misunderstanding, and it was not grief doing something strange to a lonely woman. It was a choice. Constance made it, and she made it because she had spent 4 years watching my daughter love her son faithfully and build a home and carry a child, and she had decided that none of it counted, that Iris didn't count. I think about the specific cruelty of that, not a moment of rage, but a long and deliberate refusal to see a person clearly, and yes, sometimes I feel something that might be anger. But mostly what I feel is this. What you build inside yourself eventually becomes the only house you live in. Constance built something over decades that I think she believed was pride, or standards, or tradition. What it actually was is a set of walls that kept getting smaller until there was no room left for anything true. And when the moment came, when she stood at the top of those stairs with her hands on my pregnant daughter, she was already living in a very small space indeed. I don't say that to make peace with what she did. I say it because I think it's accurate, and because accuracy matters more to me now than it ever did when I was younger. Raymond taught me that. 30 years of looking at what actually happened, not what you wish had happened, or what's easier to believe. That kind of discipline changes how you see everything, including yourself. What I know about Iris is that she spent 4 years trying to fit herself into a space that was never going to be large enough for her. She was patient when patience cost her something real. She was gracious in rooms where grace was not returned. She did this not because she was weak, but because she loved Marcus and wanted his family to work. And I think there is something worth honouring in the, even as I wish she hadn't had to do it for so long. The courage she showed in that DA's office, shoulders back, voice steady, describing the worst morning of her life to a woman with reading glasses who was evaluating whether it was worth pursuing. That courage didn't come from nowhere. It came from everything Iris had already survived. From Theodore, who taught her that the truth was always worth the discomfort of saying it. From Raymond, who showed her what it looked like to be steady. And from somewhere inside herself that the 4 years and the stairs and all of Constance's small cruelties had not managed to reach. That's the thing about what people try to take from you. They can take a great deal. They cannot take what you've actually built in the quiet parts of your life, your judgment, your sense of what's right, your ability to stand in a difficult room and tell the truth without flinching. Those things belong to you in a way that nothing outside you ever can. I carried the crib down from my attic and thought about Theodore, who built it with his hands from a tree that a storm knocked down. He always said the best wood was the kind that had already weathered something. Clara sleeps in it now, this small, skeptical girl who came into the world already deciding things, and I think she'll be fine. I think she already is.